bum, dum. Hello there, AP World people. Let's finish up Unit 3 and learn all about religion and government in the medieval world. This is mostly about Europe, but there's going to be a little bit of other stuff in here too. Let's dive into it. But oh yeah, we got some memes here. People, can we go to heaven? Catholic Church, give us your money. Let's start a new church. Let's start 40,000 of them. And tell me how I'm supposed to breathe with no air. Oh, that's funny. All right, clicking ahead. Let's do this. So let's talk about the Catholic Church during this time period. The popes, the leaders of the Christian faith during the 1500s, were god awful. They were just not quality people. In fact, the pope who's in charge in the year 1500, he has his own pet elephant that he treats like with a whole lot of respect and love. And one time he was sort of parading his elephant through Rome. His elephant freaked out and trampled to death a couple people. And he was like, "Ah, there's nothing wrong with my elephant. He's fine." And also, oh my gosh, during this period, there were so many popes that just did the worst Christian things imaginable. Like, I think it's the Pope Benedict the Ninth. He had a whole house of women. He basically had his own brothel that just serviced him with all of his manly needs, which is obviously not something the leader of the Catholic Church is supposed to do. And officially here in the slides, I talk about these two families, the Medici and the Borgia. And I know Leo the Tenth, he was one of these. I don't remember which one. But the Medici and the Borgia were these two really powerful Italian families, and they just sort of took turns being the Pope. And the families sort of worked out this deal with each other where they would just share all the money collected by the Catholic Church. And sure, they would build some churches and they would pay the fees of some of the priests, but the vast, vast majority of the money that people were putting in the church collection baskets and the people of Europe thought was going to be used to make a better life and improve lives for Christians everywhere was really just being used to improve the wealth and prestige of those two families. So just terrible nepotism, terrible corruption. Um, they brought private houses, whores, hid bastard children, gave church donations to their friends. A lot of these popes even fought like personal wars against each other. Because during this time, popes had the power to excommunicate people. So if the pope didn't like you, he'd just be like, you're the devil. You know, people of Europe, kill him. So that's super duper rude. All the while this is going on, the vast majority of people in Europe are still functionally slaves. And these people of Europe, they're sort of like serving two masters. You know, they've got the king who they got to give taxes to, and they've got this moral obligation to give money to the church. If they don't, they'll be called the devil or something, and they'll be killed. And the other thing you should know, probably some of you don't know, but the Pope is actually an elected position. And the reason why the Medici and the Borgia were constantly in charge is they just bribed everybody and said, hey, you know, all the 100 bishops and cardinals, if you always vote for us, then we'll share some of our money with you. So the Catholic Church had just gone in a really, really bad direction during this period. And to sort of show how terrible Catholicism was, is during the 1500s, agents of the Pope traveled all over Europe and they tried to raise even more money from people. They would create these special certificates just on pieces of paper, and it's basically the Christian version of a get out of jail free card. These certificates are called indulgences. And there were various kinds of indulgences. You know, there's like the $5 indulgence, and then there's the $50,000 indulgence. But the short of it was that the Pope would have his priests sell these pieces of paper. They would write people's names on the paper and then say, oh, because we've sort of used our holy power and written your name on this paper, you get to go to heaven now. So all of those evil things you did in your life, you're forgiven, you're great, as long as you give me $50,000. They also had this whole scheme set up where if your family member was already dead, your family member could be taken out of hell and put into heaven if you bought an indulgence for your family member. Um, and some of these indulgences were just terribly expensive. We're talking about a whole year's worth of work. And so these peasants would be saving up their entire lives just so they could have a priest write their name on a piece of paper saying that, you're going to go to heaven no matter what. And that would make these people feel so great because they were true believers in Christianity. They just thought that the Pope had this special power. And the Pope was just taking tons of money from people during the whole 1400s and early 1500s. Here's an actual indulgence right here from 1517. By the authority of all the saints and in mercy towards you, I absolve you from all sins and misdeeds and remit all punishments for 10 days. So that's a 10-day pass to do all the sinning and evil things you want, and then God will forgive you. So they're sort of now creating a marketing scheme out of the Christian faith. And this is going to be some pretty controversial stuff that's going to have some historical ramifications. Okay, and then let me just remind you all that the Renaissance is still going on during this time. It's something that I've got to mention in the AP course articulation. So if you're thinking like, Mr. Brown, how is it that the popes are so terrible, yet the people of Europe are being exposed to this new art, this new science, this new technology, new ideas? They sort of all got rooted from the Silk Road, but the idea of the Renaissance is that Europe was now starting to think in new ways. They're now sort of started to get out of the mindset of Jesus or bust. Most of these people are still going to be hardcore Christians, no doubt, but they're no longer going to allow these corrupt popes to control every move they make. And people are now going to start questioning the ideas of indulgences and the ideas that the popes are the supreme power of Europe. And the printing press entered Europe at around this time. So these new ideas are going to be shared even faster. They're going to spread around, and the Pope and his agents are not going to be able to clamp new ideas down like they used to in the past. So, yeah, super cool. All right. I know the word ideas is on this slide like 6 times, but that's basically what the Renaissance is all about. Maybe I could have summarized this better. Okay, moving on. The Renaissance, changing thoughts, changing ideas in Europe. And you usually see that a lot in art. So let's check it out. So the new challenger approaches, my man, Martin Luther. And don't you dare say King Jr. on a DBQ or an essay. I know a lot of people like to do that. But no, this is the original Martin Luther. This man is who Martin Luther King Jr. is ultimately named after. So way back then, on Halloween of 1517, this German Catholic monk named Martin Luther, he's a guy who dedicated his whole life to the Catholic faith. He was a real believer in Jesus Christ. He memorized the Bible. This dude is hardcore. And he took this trip to Rome where he thought he would be sort of shown the love of Christ, and maybe he would sort of see the Pope come by, and he would, sort of be in awe of the Pope's holiness on earth. But when he goes to Rome, he sees that the Pope and the Catholic Church have sort of just turned the whole faith into a giant money racket. And then when he gets back to Germany, he finds that they're trying to sell indulgences to people for $50,000, the equivalent of $50,000 for just a piece of paper. And he collectively says, this isn't right. Like, this is not the Christianity of the Bible that I memorized. Y'all are going in the wrong direction. So on Halloween of 1517, he goes to the big church in Germany and he posts this giant document called the 95 Theses. And it's really 95 reasons why the Catholic Church is screwing up. And I think like 30 or 40 of those reasons all related to the concept of indulgences. He says there's nowhere in the Bible that says you can pay to go into heaven. That is totally wrong. So people copied his 95 Theses. They shared it all over Europe, and the Pope couldn't stop it. And more people are sort of using these ideas from the Renaissance, and they're critically thinking, and they're like, maybe this Martin Luther guy is right, and the Pope is wrong. Well, Pope Leo did not like that at all. And Pope Leo sent assassins after Martin Luther. He tried to shut these ideas down, but the ideas were spreading so fast he couldn't control it anymore. And so Luther, he even took it to the next stage. Once he saw that the Catholic Church wasn't going to listen to him, that the Catholic Church was They already called him the devil. They excommunicated him. He said, well, you know what? I'm going to create my own version of Christianity. I'm going to make the right version of Christianity that's going to be separate from the Catholic version. And he created a new religion named after himself. That's kind of a bold move, called Lutheranism. And his main message was all you need to do to go to heaven is just believe in Jesus Christ. That's it. No money. You don't even have to go to church. You don't have to pay anything. You know, you could be a Lutheran and just have a Bible, read it every once in a while. You're like, okay, I'm good with the Lord, and then you're going to heaven. The Catholics would not agree with that. The Catholics would say you have to come to church every once in a while. You have to practice communion. You have to, well, at this point in history, put some money in the basket every Sunday, or else you don't go to heaven. Well, Luther's like, nah, it's just about you and your personal connection to Jesus. So, and there's the symbol of his new faith, the Lutheran faith. All right, so boom. Yeah, let me keep telling you some other stuff about Lutheranism. So he rejected that the Pope was holier than any other Christian, because still to this day, Catholics will tell you that the Pope has kind of a personal connection to God and Christ. But Luther's like, nope, we're all equal in the eyes of the Lord. He also said, see, I just emphasized that again. He wrote his own simpler version of the Bible. I think that's kind of cool. He memorized the original Bible and then it's like, I'm going to cut down some pages, make it easier. And yeah, as I mentioned, the Pope tried to have Luther killed, and the people of Germany rallied around Luther, and it started this sort of civil war in Germany called the Peasants' War. And a lot of German people sided with Luther. They're like, look, the Pope was taking all of our money. All those indulgences were a waste of our time. We don't want to deal with the Pope anymore. So the peasants of Germany won the Peasants' War, and Germany will be Lutheran for the rest of human history. Germany's a good mix today, but there's still a lot of Lutherans in Germany to this day. So this is a split in the Catholic faith, and now there's kind of two universes happening here. And also, Lutheranism is going to spread to all the Scandinavia countries, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Finland. So the Pope is losing ground with the Catholic faith. It's now a shrinking religion for probably its first time in its history. All right, moving on. Okay, so after this war, other Christian reformers are going to pop up all over Europe, and they're going to get inspiration from Martin Luther, and they're going to say, well, he created his own version of Christianity. I'm going to make a little different version too. And now thousands of different versions of Christianity are coming up. The Calvinist faith, that came up in France. They have this interesting belief that God determines if you go to heaven or hell in like the first moments you're born. So like all the choices you make in life sort of don't matter. They're not really a big religion anymore today. The Anabaptists, they will ultimately make their way to the United States later, and they say, gotta baptize yourself all the time. And the Anglican faith, I'm actually going to deep dive into that later in this presentation. So they all get that inspiration, break away from the Catholic Church, doing their own thing. And all of these non-Catholic versions of Christianity are collectively called Protestantism. And this whole time period is the Reformation of Christianity. We are reforming the faith and creating new versions to practice Christianity in their own unique, different way. Still in the modern world today, the majority of Christians are Catholic, but there's still Lutherans, Anglicans, Anabaptists. There might even be some Calvins. I don't even know if there are any in the world anymore. But as you can see from this picture down here too, the Christian faith goes in 100 different directions. So that's all super cool. All right, moving on. And now with the Pope losing a whole lot of his power, you're probably wondering, well, are the peasants going to go after the kings? The answer is not yet. The peasants of Europe will go after the kings, but that happens later in history. Because there was this concept called the divine right of kings, which, believe it or not, nobody really challenged during this period. I mean, Luther had all of his problems with the Pope. He didn't really have anything nasty to say about kings, because people just sort of believed that the royal families of Europe were predetermined by God, that God blessed these families by being royalty, so therefore that maybe these people had a connection to God that the rest of the European peasants did not. Um, and so yeah, surprisingly, it's never really challenged in the Protestant Reformation. Um, and yeah, most of their issues were all with the Catholic Church. So that's just me emphasizing that even more. All right, moving on. So, I said I would deep dive into the Anglican faith, and here I go. Uh, the other kind of big player in this period of history called the Reformation is the King of England, Henry VIII. He has such an interesting life story. So, Henry, he had a prearranged marriage with the Princess of Spain. Her name was Catherine of Aragon. And Catherine of Aragon was like 32, and he was 19. So they had some serious age differences, and here's their portraits right here. So Henry, he's a young man who liked to do three things in his life. He liked to eat, he liked to have sex, and he liked to have male children. And over the course of his life, he's only going to do two of those three things. So you could probably guess what those are. And he really got frustrated with Catherine. Catherine wasn't a very beautiful woman, and Henry likes to do the thing with the young ladies. And Catherine, she got pregnant. She had a daughter, so he's like, I kind of want a son. And he tried to get Catherine pregnant more, but it wasn't working out. So Henry really starts to have eyes for this 19-year-old girl named Anne Boleyn. She is a fine, foxy lady by all accounts. And Anne Boleyn refuses to be his mistress. Smart move, Anne. Anne says, no, you gotta divorce your wife and you gotta make me queen, then you can get this. And, well, Henry petitions the Pope and says, hey, Pope, I'm a good Catholic. I'm asking you for help. Can I get a divorce from Catherine of Aragon? And the Pope says, no. You and the Princess of Spain have locked in an eternal marriage. The Catholic Church does not believe in divorce at this time. I mean, that'll change later in history, but the Catholic Church didn't believe in divorce then. So Henry decided to just say screw it to the whole Catholic faith. He saw what Martin Luther was doing in Germany, so he said, I'm going to copy them. I'm going to create my own church. He called it the Anglican Church of England. He made himself the Pope of this church. He gave himself a divorce, and he married Anne Boleyn. And also, interestingly enough, he stole all of the Catholic properties in the whole United Kingdom. And that really like pissed off some people, but the vast majority of people are like, oh hey, no more indulgences? Great, we don't want to pay the Catholic or the Pope anymore either. So England is now totally breaking away from the rest of Europe right here. So the Pope, he declared war on Henry. He told the people that Henry was an agent of the devil, they should kill him. But the people of England generally didn't care because Henry took a lot of the Catholic property and he just sort of gave it away to the people of England, and they loved him for that. But just the most interesting part of this period of history. So this dude, he created his own religion to get with this girl. And once Anne Boleyn becomes queen, by all accounts, her attitude dramatically changes. And she, I don't know what words I should say, but she's no longer the kind, nice, caring woman he fell in love with. So he gets her pregnant. She has a daughter, ugh. And Henry's ultimately accuses her of sleeping with her brother. Anne denies it, and it's pretty historically capable that that it didn't happen. But Henry honestly just started to have eyes for another lady. So he accuses Anne of misdeeds, and because he's the Pope of England, he has Anne executed. So he made a religion for this girl. He kills her anyway. And what's even more insane is this same story happens with three more women. Henry VIII, he just can't stop falling in love with women, getting disappointed by them, and then he just orders them to be killed, and then he just gets another woman in his life. There's this great story of him more or less getting catfished, the equivalent of a 500-year-old version of catfishing, because he expects the Princess of Denmark is this beautiful woman, but the artists gave her some, let's say 500-year-old version of Photoshop editing. So yeah, Henry VIII. This guy's life story is just silly. He ultimately dies from eating too much. He was supposed like a 400-pound dude, so no wonder why it was he had to sort of win over these women with a marriage proposal. But he's an interesting man in history, no doubt. He was all about me and no one else. Okay, moving on. So, yeah, when Henry died, the throne actually passed to his daughter with Anne. Her name is Elizabeth. And by all accounts, Elizabeth was super duper smart. She further developed the Church of England. She kind of locked it in as being a very different thing from Catholicism. So, for the rest of history, England will never be Catholic again. She also made it so English queens could have the same power as kings. I think for most of her reign, they called her the Virgin Queen, even though that wasn't true. She did have kind of a side guy. But she officially never married for the rest of her life because she wanted to be in charge. She didn't want no man to take it from her. And also, by so many accounts, one of the best English rulers of all time. The whole fact that, like, so much of British thought is God save the Queen, the Queen's Royal Air Force. And even the fact today, the current ruler of England is Elizabeth II. So, of the same family line, of course, and everything else. Yeah, Elizabeth, super duper smart. Her new church allows priests to marry, writes a new, simpler version of the Bible in English this time. And the Pope was so pissed at this lady. He declares her to be the devil. He tries to organize all of the European powers to fight back, but he's dealing with problems in Germany. So the only one he can get to help is Spain. Spain invades England and fails in an event called the Spanish Armada. It was really just a lot of bad weather on Spain's part, and the English did some good ship tactics. They forced the Spanish Navy to go into these channels where a lot of the ships crashed into rocks, and it was really really intelligent for them. So once the Spanish Armada fails, the Pope's got nothing left, and he's kind of got to just let England go their own way, which they absolutely do. Okay, so now the Pope has lost half of Christianity to Protestantism. The Pope is summoned, and the Pope summons all the lead Christians that are left in Europe, and he says, guys, why are so many people leaving? We lost Germany, we lost England, we're probably not going to get them back. What can we do to make sure the Catholic faith doesn't completely fall apart? Well, at this event called the Council of Trent in 1545, they reformed the Catholic faith. They listened to the people and they made Catholicism 1,000% better. We're talking about no more indulgences. We're talking about honest elections, checks on corruption, and for the rest of history, Catholics are just high fiveable good people. Okay? And but also with this, the Pope says no more crusades, no more telling kings and queens what to do. And he sort of gave up this kind of political power position that the Pope had traditionally had through so much of history. This event is called the Counter Reformation because the whole rest of this is called the Reformation of Christianity. And yeah, so for the rest of history, Catholics, good people, no longer doing rude stuff. And yeah, this changing focus is going to be like, hey, rather than enforce our religion on other people of Europe, maybe we should be nicer to people of Europe. But that's going to happen a little bit later because Christopher Columbus, he just discovers the New World right around this time. And also at the Council of Trent, they say, look, we should put a lot of our resources into trying to convert the peoples of the New World and having them sort of join up with Team Catholicism because we're losing so many Europeans in this side of the world. All right, cool. Yeah, and here I am just summarizing that again. So the new focus of future popes is to create these groups called Jesuits, and Jesuits are kind of these trained, specialized missionaries that are going to go to the New World that Columbus just found. They're going to go all the way to India, to Asia, to Africa, and they'll learn the native languages, they'll learn the customs, and they'll be like, what up, people? Have you heard about Jesus? Here you go. Here's some free Jesus in your life. I want to save your soul. So these Jesuits, they're still around the world today, and they're just spreading the Catholic faith. So that's what's up. Yeah, so there we go. That's kind of the big reason why Catholicism is such a big deal in Latin America and big parts of Africa to this day. They also got to the Philippines, and the Philippines is the most Catholic country in Asia to this day. So, yeah, Jesuits know what they're about, spreading the word of God. All right, moving on. So, the last topic I'll talk about today is the guy I referenced 2 slides ago, Christopher Columbus. A lot of you are hopefully aware of this man, but his experience is sort of wrapped into the whole thing with the Reformation and religious influence on government as well. He was an Italian explorer, and he wanted to prove there was a quicker way to get to Asia than going all the way around Africa, because it was super duper long to get around Africa, and the overland routes in the Silk Road at this time, they were controlled by the Ottomans, Safavids, and Mughals, the gunpowder empires. They were charging way too much money to use the Silk Road, but Europeans still wanted some of that cool stuff that you could only get in China. So he talks to the Spanish royalty, and they agree to give him the money and the ships and the sailors to sail east from Europe and to get to China. And remember, he got all this technology to finally do this voyage from the various learning and exchanges on the Silk Road. And yes, some historians, like I just read this article the other day, saying that Christopher Columbus's whole journey was not motivated by money or by exploration. It was, I want to undermine the Ottoman, Safavid, and Mughal empires. We don't want to give those Muslim empires any more money than we have to. We want to try to do our dealing with China and totally ignore that central part of the world. And there could be some case to that. But another thing I'll mention about Christopher Columbus is his entire life, he thinks he discovered Asia. He honestly, he did the math wrong, okay? Like, everybody knew that the world was round, but Christopher Columbus thought the world was like 20,000 miles long, when in reality it's like 60,000 miles long. So he really messed up the math there. Okay, but anyway, so Columbus sets off from Europe, famously does the voyage east for the first time, sails farther than everyone else has gone, and then he hits these islands. He basically discovers the Caribbean. And while he's there, he meets these island people who live on the islands of, I think it's like modern day Cuba and Hispaniola. But these people are known as the Taino/Arawak people. They kind of have two names. And they had some gold jewelry, and Columbus was like, hey, gold, that's something I'm kind of here for. But they were a really basic tribal culture, and Columbus and his men kept asking them, like, where's China? Where's China? And I mean, they didn't really have a good map knowledge of what China looked like, so they falsely called these people Indians because they assumed they were in some island kind of close to India. They had kind of a similar skin color to people from India, so they just used racist knowledge to falsely call them that. But anyway, Columbus, he decides to do the good Catholic thing, teaches these people about Christianity, but then he also is there to kind of like make money and to find the stuff they're supposed to get in China, so he forces the people to mine gold. But the Taino and the Arawaks, they really didn't get along with Columbus that well, especially once he was forcing them to mine gold. And the other thing, too, that really kind of confused Columbus and his crew was huge amounts of the Taino Arawak people were getting sick and dying. They were all coming down with these similar diseases, and I'll talk about that on the next slide. So, I'll talk about it in 2 slides. So Columbus, he inadvertently started something called the Columbian Exchange, where these new items between the Western world and the Eastern world are finally being exchanged for the first time. I want you guys to know what some of these items are. Like Europe, for all of human history, Europe had grapes, peaches, citrus fruits, cows, sheep, pigs, horses, and the Americas never had that stuff. But on the other hand, America, we had turkey, pumpkin, squash, pineapple, avocado, peppers, corn, and that stuff never existed in Europe, Africa, or Asia before. So this transfer of, well, it's honestly a lot of foodstuffs is going to work out really great, honestly, for both parties, because the more varied your diet is, the longer you live and the healthier you are. And if we know something about luxury goods, Europeans love food. Okay? As they travel around the world, the go-to question process is like this. Have you heard about Jesus? what do you guys eat? And do you have any silver or gold? Okay, that's kind of the series of questions that Europeans ask everywhere they go. Um, but yeah, I want you guys to generally know some of these things. And I think the easy way to remember it is this: like, think of like traditional Thanksgiving food, potatoes, turkeys, pumpkins. So a lot of that stuff is native to North and South America, and also quite a bit of Mexican cuisine. Avocado, peppers, tomatoes, corn. That stuff is also native to the Americas. So there is kind of some lasting historical legacy of where you'll find certain foods. But once this process starts, Columbus and his successive explorer guys, they're going to just be taking these foods from the Americas and bringing them to Europe, and they'll be taking stuff from Europe, bringing them to the Americas. So it'll be this huge agricultural exchange that will really make both parties better. But there's actually one part of the Columbian Exchange that's kind of a one-way thing that's really bad. The Native American Holocaust. Yeah, it's pretty terrible. So when Columbus and his guys were there, meeting with the Taínos and the Arawaks, as I said, so many of them were dying from a disease. The disease, mostly smallpox, but also measles and also other diseases that existed in the old world, but for all of history never made it to North or South America. And in the next 300 years, these diseases will spread all over North and South America and just wipe out whole civilizations. Okay, it's going to kill 100 million people. This is the worst tragedy in human history. Like World War II, high estimates say 75 million people died. The Mongol invasions, high estimates are what, 50, 60 million people died. This is 100 million people. It is crazy. And just so you know what smallpox is, all of you, I hope, have taken a smallpox vaccine at some point in your life. It's one of those required to go to school kind of vaccines. And uh, we have successfully exterminated smallpox from planet Earth. It only exists in a couple laboratories in some research centers. We should honestly get rid of it, especially with COVID 19. Oh my God, if smallpox came back, how bad would that be? But it's a disease where if you get it, there's a pretty good chance it's going to kill you. All these little bubbles sort of form around your skin. Your skin sort of starts working against you. These bubbles also form inside of your lungs and your heart and other organs. And eventually you just have organ failure and you die. Some people do survive, but if you survive, then your skin looks like this for the rest of your life, and it's pretty gross stuff. So, and this disease just massacres, especially children. If a baby gets this, it's really bad. Okay, so uh, take medicine. Don't don't let these diseases ever come back, please. It's 2020 for God's sakes. All right, so for Columbus, oh yeah, I mentioned this. For Columbus's entire life, he believed that he was on the islands near China, but only after his death that people started to be like, you know what? I don't think that's China because they actually found some European explorer guys and they were like reading the accounts of, Marco Polo and Ibn Battuta and stuff. They're like, nah, this ain't China. This is totally different. And so the eventual realization was they had discovered a or a disconnected part of planet Earth. Yeah, and they're gonna call it Americas. There you go. Um, and here's the thing though. Like there is this big sort of historical debate over was Columbus a good guy because he came over here and he did a lot of he forced the Taino and Arawak people to mine gold, and so many of them died from the diseases he brought over. Is he a guy who deserves a holiday? Like that's a big question in our modern world. So, and yeah, and especially because Columbus thought he was in Asia the whole time. That's also like pretty silly. Okay, so I've got a couple more slides. I know this is a really long presentation, but a couple more slides about Native American cultures. So we're still kind of relating a lot of this to religion and government. And the Aztecs and the Inca, they both believed in human sacrifice. The Inca, they had this special practice. I'm not even going to try to say that. Quepacacha. It was about sending girls to the tops of tall mountains with the intention of them dying up there to be sacrificed to the gods, be an offering to the gods. Every time they always froze to death. It was considered a great honor for Inca girls to die this way. It was seen as them, like, you know, refreshing their people's connection to the gods. And a kind of interesting thing is a lot of those girls are still up there at the top of those mountains in South America. So some of their dead bodies have been taken down, put in museums, and you get a sense of what their cultures were like. What is this? 500 years ago. All right, I think this is my last slide. So I just talked about the Incas of South America, but the Aztecs of Mexico, I've already mentioned to you that they were really into human sacrifice. Like the Incas, they would sacrifice, I don't know, maybe one person a month, but the Aztecs, they would cut out someone's heart every single day. The belief that the Aztecs had was that if you did not cut out someone's heart at the top of the sun temple of Tenochtitlan every single day, then the next day the sun would not rise. There were also festival periods called, oh, I'm not even going to try to say that one either. Okay, I will. Zumapuli, where 1,000+ hearts would be cut out of people's bodies and given to the sun god in one day. That's crazy. Mass murder. And to create potential people for human sacrifices, the Aztecs knew that they were killing people all the time for their religion, so they actually had state-sponsored prostitutes. So they're like, hey, girl, we want you to make more babies, and we'll make a career out of it. And, well, let's not talk about what's ultimately going to happen to your babies when they get older. Um, Also, the Aztecs, they went to war with neighboring countries for the express purpose of kidnapping people to be human sacrifices. I think I mentioned something about this earlier in the presentation, too. Um, but yeah, so anyway, the Aztecs, most hardcore human sacrifice people ever. No doubt. No doubt at all. All right, and that's it for my presentation. Hope you enjoyed Unit 3. Peace out.